Ready to move to the next level in your product career? I'm Shobhit from Intentional Product Manager. Join me as we discuss ways to help you stand out in your job search and your career so you can have more impact and make more money. Welcome to today's podcast. Today, a very special topic all about product leadership job search and executive recruiting. And I have a very special guest, Alex Klein. Alex was a principal at TrueSearch during its period of explosive growth and the first partner hired by TrueSearch, where he served as a partner and practice lead. Now, Alex has gone the entrepreneurial route. He's since founded Nucleus Talent, an early stage exec search firm specialized in hiring investment professionals and operating executives for enterprise startups. Alex, welcome to the Intentional Product Manager podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Shobhit. It's great to be here.
So I'm going to jump right in and send you some tough questions, or like the kinds of questions that our listeners are always asking. The first one is, there's a popular saying that 90% of senior executive roles are never posted online. Is that true, or is that a lie someone made up?
I think that's probably a fair estimate. I do think that majority of these recs are, especially at the VP tier and above, not posted online. I said there's a slew of reasons and there's a lot of nuances as to why, but I think that's more than a fair statement to say that about 90% of the VP plus roles are rarely posted. Even the senior director, head of plus tend to be tighter held. And some is because of us exec recruiters, some are because of communities, networks. Some have a bunch of other reasons for it, but I think that's a fair number.
Why not just post them online? There must be some reason, tell us more.
Listen, I think once we start getting into these VP or C-level searches, or Nucleus lives at the early stage, so call it your first in function leader that you're bringing in, first VP, first kind of functional head. These are really high impact hires to your organization that if you get it right, can be a 10x hire. If you get it wrong, it can blow up the org. I think because of how critical it is to get it right, they tend to be driven much more methodically. And I'll give you an example, because about half of our work is actually on the investment professional side of things, as more and more VCs are looking for former product leaders or engineering leaders to join on the venture investor side of the coin. I think that for these folks, it is it's just really it's important for a couple of different reasons, but I think ultimately not hurting people's feelings who are in your network is certainly high on the list there. I think everyone wants to be at the top of the mountain, so you could imagine if a C-level or a VP search an opportunity is posted on LinkedIn, the number of applicants will be pretty extreme. I think when we boil down qualifications, what we're really looking for out of these first hires, leadership hires, or these scale-up executives, it's very uncommon that you'll be getting someone coming internally, right? Those job slots, they cost 10 grand a slot, right? I don't think it positions the company to land the best leader. I think for exec search, it's more methodical. There's a lot more nuances, and because they have just a much greater impact to the org, the public visibility is just a little bit less important for them.
I love your point on this being a 10x hire and why that's driving many of these. And often people miss that point.
Especially the early, the first in function leaders, they're going to distill the culture into your org, right? And I think that type of hire should be so strategic that posting it online is a lazy way to fill a job.
What's your biggest pet peeve or pet peeves when you see candidates approaching you for a particular role?
So that's really funny. I know there's a lot of recruiters who have a lot of pet peeves on. I don't really have any pet peeves on getting approached by and I'll unpack that a little bit by getting approached by a candidate. I think just looking at like this investor ecosystem in venture and private equity, there's not a lot of public info for how to break in, for how to operate. There's a million nuances in that world, right? And I think exec search is really similar. I don't think there's great market maps for what firms are perfect for the Series B CTO versus the public company, building industrials, right? There's not resources out there like that, and there's just a lot of nuances here. So I'm always open to talking and kind of demystifying executive search a little bit for these folks. I think that if I called out a pet peeve, right, it's the note that was clearly blasted to 100 recruiters, right? I think it's the same as like a sales outreach, right? Like you take a little bit of time, do a little bit of research, show that you care just enough. I'll take that call, and I think that a lot of the top folks are going to be just too busy to take that call. I try to take as many as I can. I can't take all of them, right? But there's not a lot out there, so I do try to help.
I'm sure people appreciate that. That's really helpful.
For sure. And I guess the other pet peeve, like in the same vein there, is maybe reply to the gist of like, I would only look at XYZ, right? Maybe someone is right now at a decent tech company. Their track record is strong. They are accelerating in their career. They're advancing. Like things are going well, right? But and I'm sure other firms get quite a few pings of like, hey, I've done this for 5 years at Instacart, or I came in Series B. I didn't really build anything at the foundational layer, but I've been riding this wave that's been fantastic. I'd only consider head of product roles at Sequoia-backed Series A companies. Might stretch out for Andreessen. Just thought I'd make sure you know. Like, I'm probably not going to reach out to that person, but that was kind of a stretch example.
Let's jump into your own career journey and like how you got into this space. So can you share the story of how you got into executive search and like what drew you into this space?
Yeah. So first of all, I didn't even know executive search was a real industry until I was a couple of years into recruiting. Back to the point of demystifying exec search a little bit. I do want to call that out. I started on the contingency side of things. There's two worlds in recruiting, right? You have your contingency search firms. These folks they can be really good. They tend to support hiring for individual contributor searches up to call it like director. Sometimes they'll play in like the head of world a little bit. You only pay them if they find a candidate for you that you hire and that person stays for 90 days. It's really not a lot of risk you're taking on as a founder working with a firm like that. And there's a ton of those firms that are out there for sure. So that is one end of the spectrum, right? I think the other end of the spectrum is the retained world, and they're two completely different universes, and I'd argue they're not the same industry at all. I think one on the contingency side, that's a sales role, right? That is absolutely a sales role. That is a candidate market. You get a hot candidate, you send them and get them as many interviews at as many different companies to maximize the likelihood of a good outcome for you, which is a successful hire. Those fees are over 50 grand, so super lucrative if you have some talent on the IC side. So that's the contingency world. Sometimes contingency shops will try to swim upstream and land exec searches. There's one or two that are doing that right now. I've never seen success with that. I was at a firm, Magento, that tried to do something very similar. The reason why is the cloth is very different. Retained executive search is absolutely management consulting. It's professional services. It is polished, white glove, highly diligent in research and outcomes. The entire experience and loop should feel like that client is working with McKinsey. It should be, it's a whole different ball game. And not saying there aren't exceptional folks on both sides. I came from Contingency. It is a different ball game. But back to me. So I started at a firm called Talent, who at the time had a couple of offices. I fell into it completely. I was looking for a job. I moved to LA after school. I wanted to move to like a big city. Also wanted to be by the beach, and had a brother in LA. So I moved to LA and wasn't happy at my finance job. Was working at a big finance shop at the time. Went on LinkedIn and just applied to a whole bunch of open roles. And this is at the time where folks started calling LA Silicon Beach. We had a couple of startups, Snapchat and Tinder, starting to take off a little bit. Ad tech was all down there. OpenX, Rubicon Project, Adconian, had a bunch of folks. So like decent talent pool. Up front was out there. Graycroft had an office downtown. So we really started to get on the map a little bit in LA, and I absolutely loved it. Talent was geo and function specific, so I only hired software engineers and product managers for startups in LA. Organic growth model at that firm, so they didn't hire leaders outside. When they wanted to open and expand into a new geo, they'd promote someone that was performing well to go open and build that office out, and through that was able to build teams and work in New York City and San Francisco, and eventually was tapped to take over the LA practice, which was a $3 million P&L, 4 specialized recruiting teams with 20 recruiters, all doing LA tech. Loved it. Never thought I'd go anywhere, and really didn't know much about exec search. Had a mentor who was just getting going there, but I was making a lot of money hiring folks that were more junior, and I was having a lot of fun with it. So I didn't really think about it, but I respected a couple of founders of other search firms that were boutiques who ended up being acquired by a holdings company called Agento. Agento acquired 4 A+ boutique recruiting firms across the Bay Area and LA. Most notably Rocket Recruiting and Neo Hire. Neo Hire was a top shop in LA. Their founder, Josh, was like this absolute legend in LA recruiting. You could just tell he's like a great dude. And someone you want to work with. He sent me a recruiting note saying he was just acquired. He needs someone to really kind of tie everything together, and need like a great recruiting leader in LA that's down to spend some time in San Francisco, and was reluctant to take the call, took the meeting, fell in love with the team, joined Agento after 5 years at Talenter, and initial mandate was kind of harmonizing best practices across all these different groups and orgs, a bunch of different personalities, 4 different founders in there, all doing individual contributor team building work primarily across the Bay Area and New York. The path into executive search comes here. One of the founders that was acquired in, mentor of mine and someone that I hope is in my orbit the rest of my professional career, gentleman Cody Vallinger. He co-founded Rocket Recruiting with woman Jane. Rocket Recruiting, without a doubt, was the #1 recruiting shop for like team building SWEs and product managers in the Bay Area for quite some time. He had a fantastic book of business with talent partners in venture capital and private equity. His talent partners historically are the air traffic controllers in terms of they meet with founders, understand the hiring needs, and then route them to the right search firms who they think will absolutely crush the search for them. Cody wanted to leverage that book of business to start an executive search practice, and had about 120, 150 folks total across all the acquired properties, but ended up tapping myself on 3 other folks to be like the SEAL team to start this executive search practice at Agento. It was probably about 6 months in. So really leaned into it. I was running alongside some absolutely brilliant people. Zoe and Megan ended up both being partners at Artisanal Talent. Gentleman Arc, that was running research for us, is murdering it at Skydio. I think he just hit his like 4 or 5 year anniversary over there. And then Cody is an absolute genius, and he's also a great human. So I was able to start working on a couple of executive searches. I think the first one was a CTO search for a commerce company in LA called Network. That was brought in by Cody and was super excited to work on. We stayed focused on product and engineering. We weren't going after the big dog, Shobhit. So we were losing against the Trues and the Rivieras and the Diverses of the world. So we wanted to partner with them and do like a click under. So we were doing more like VP head of stuff. Loved it. It was fantastic. Learned a bunch about executive search and learned about this new role I didn't know anything about, which was a talent partner in venture capital. And I'll come back to that. But that was a fantastic like entry into exec search. After 2 years, Agento unfortunately did implode as a search firm. We were trying to do too many things. We had the exec search practice. We also were running an embedded group. We were running a contingency arm. It was just sloppy. It was poorly run. So we did end up closing our doors. Luckily, I had the opportunity to do some work with some great funds. One of them was Battery Ventures, was introduced to a couple of firms by their talent partner, who ended up introducing me to TrueSearch when I told her the doors were closing, along with a couple of other firms. Fell in love with TrueSearch, and I think the rest is kind of history from there. But I feel like I got the world-class exposure, understood what great looked like, worked with all of the sexy companies and the funds out there. And then Artico took that to a completely new level. And I'm happy to get into that more, but that's kind of my journey into search.
It seems a lot based on early relationships you had built, like those took you forward, and then of course smart thinking on your part combined with that. So you joined at a time where it was really growing fast and high growth phase. Like, what were some of the key experiences and lessons learned working over there?
There's a million. I'll try to boil it down a little bit. So, I mean, I'll call out, I'm obviously a little biased here, but True's the best firm in the entire world, and they are for many different reasons. And I've met just about every firm out there. But I think the first humbling thing for me is I came into TrueSearch. I probably had 7-8 years of recruiting experience. I'd hired for Tinder and Snapchat and all of these companies who I thought made me a really good recruiter. And I thought I was like a top 1% recruiter. I was the worst recruiter in all of True, a couple hundred people when I joined. And that was very humbling. I came in as a principal, was learning from associates. Again, earlier point, executive search is a whole different ball game. And just like experiencing that was really powerful, candidly. When I was at True, the founding group and the leadership team, yes, the market was bananas, but they scaled like very thoughtfully. True started as more of an agnostic search firm, but as they grew, started matrixing out in functional and commercial sectors. And the net there was that they wouldn't lose the expertise, right? These sectors and these functional and commercial practice areas, these are led by absolute A-plus partners who could easily be running their own executive search firms right now. And that was a big key to their success, right? Like these entrepreneurial, they really care about True, and it was easy to do that. And they were running these as mini businesses, and because it was so matrixed, even though we got pretty big, if I were a Series B founder in fintech selling into the enterprise, I would be, and I got in with True, the person working on that search in the last 6 months would have probably done 5 or 6 Series B or C roles in fintech. So they're an absolute expert, right? And I think that served them extremely well. I'll share a personal story about True, and I think this is why they're successful, or at least a piece of it. I wasn't a good recruiter when I joined, right? Like, I called that out, or I wasn't a good exec recruiter when I joined. And about 3 or 4 months in to my time at True, I lost my best friend and brother to a drug overdose. I was falling down left and right. And looking back, like, I just wasn't very good at the job yet. I was very scared to ask for any time off. The market was absolutely on fire. This is circa like 2020, 2021, working at the best search firm in the world. And, I was trying to make a name for myself, so I didn't want to ask for any time away. But I did share with my manager just kind of what I was dealing with, and of course I was devastated, and ended up hearing from, I won't say which founder, but one of the founders from True reached out to me directly. This is their co-CEOs. Firm is hundreds of people. They, at the time, were closing on a PE raise. Market was absolutely bonkers. This gentleman sat and met every single candidate as a final conversation before coming into TrueSearch. And I share that just to say they're a little busy. But he had reached out to me directly, told me to take at least a month off, told me that I would be paid during this time. And I'll never forget about that. Absolutely never forget about that. I think that is that like care that just they fucking give a shit at True about their people. I think is a big reason for the success. They never, I'll give you one other anecdote about True. There is no one at True that as far as I'm concerned, in leadership that bashes other firms. It just doesn't happen. They don't talk down on other firms. They focus on doing great work. The path to partner at True is through absolutely crushing it on the execution front. They couldn't care less if you're generating BD. There's no BD mandate baked in at principal partner. The mandate was to do excellent work on the execution front. As I started interviewing at other search firms, this is very unique to True. There's absolutely a BD mandate that's baked in. Once you get to a certain level of other search firms, the focus on execution for True is big reason why, they're kind of leading the pack right now. And I think to wrap it up, I came from a world in which I met some really smart folks. I hired some brilliant folks, right? But I didn't have the reps or the insight into what a world-class exec search felt like, what it looked like, and what the outcome was. And True netted me a lot of that, right? What does a great candidate look like? You can only meet great candidates by being in market with great opportunities, right? So it's like a double-edged sword. You'll never know what world-class is unless you work at a world-class search firm. And the same is true with venture investing. You'll never know what a world-class founder is unless you work at a world-class venture firm, unless you get really lucky. So like that was priceless for me. Learned the ins and outs of private equity and venture. learned a ton about enterprise as the beast of the sector it is, and had the chance to do quite a bit of consumer. So I got a lot out of True. It was a really it was a great time in my life.
I love two things. Like one, the instance you gave where they cared so much about a founder telling you take a month off. And then this like you only find good people when you are in market with great opportunities. And like there is a little bit of a chicken and egg here. It's awesome. Let's actually talk a bit about your work with VC firms. So you mentioned you're bringing in a lot of people as investors in venture funds. And these are people with prior engineering and product background. Tell me more about that and like what's changed in the venture industry that's driving some of that in.
Venture is definitely evolving right now. Historically, if you look at all of the storied funds, the classic, if I'm a VC firm and say I just raised a new fund, I want to bring on a partner to help me deploy this thing. The background we were looking for was coming from another VC fund, right? Or coming from consulting or banking, right? I think like the McKinsey Goldman VC, like that was the spec, right? And tremendous success, and still very much is kind of the mandate on plenty of them. But around the time I joined True, so it's about 5 years ago now. There was a clear shift in who fund managers were gravitating towards as they thought about bringing in new check writing partners onto the fund. And that shift was very much towards this like highly technical, probably more entrepreneurial than scale up, but like highly technical entrepreneurial DNA, has maybe been doing some angel investing. Maybe they're in a scout fund. They've shown some interest in the investing world, and maybe they're open to making a shift into VC, right? That was 1 in 10 pitches 5 years ago. Today, I'd say 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10. It is, I only do venture, and I'm sure that changes upstream. But in early stage venture, particularly if we're hiring an infrastructure investor, and that can be anywhere from dev tools to cloud and security, the mandates are commonly wanting this profile, and the reasoning behind it has to do with the right to win, right? I think that if I'm a 22-year-old technical founder building a SaaS company, if I have the opportunity, I'll use Joff as an example. Joff is the former chief product officer at Atlassian. He joined Menlo Ventures last year as a partner. If I am a technical founder, I'm 22 years old, and I'm building, we'll say a dev tools company from the Atlassian, but I'm building a dev tools company, I would like nothing more than to work with someone like Joff. So Joff has, we'll call it a year of experience now, right? Who is going to have a better chance to win a deal we know is going to be absolutely elite, extremely competitive? Is it going to be Joff at Menlo, or is it going to be the 29-year-old partner at Andreessen who's never been part of a startup, came from consulting and banking, but has this awesome track record? Candidly, it's probably coin flip at that point, right? And most will probably go to Joff. So like I don't even want to call it an extreme example, because I think if we're talking about firms, storied firms like Menlo, like Andreessen, Sequoia, Coatue, Bessemer, they can hire Joff. If we're talking about a seed fund, we've seen plenty of other examples, but they tend to have more founder DNA. So an example on the seed side, right? You look at someone like Jesse Robbins, founder of Chef, highly technical, crazy engineering pedigree, was doing some advisory work for HeavyBit over the years. Now he's a GP, right? Maybe he felt like he's built and sold 10 enough companies now where he's ready to help advising on the other side, right? Yes, the shift is very real. And there's a couple of things that if you're a product exec or an engineering leader or a technical founder today, you can be doing to position yourself to help break through that wall whenever the time comes. But that's kind of ties to the thesis of Nucleus, right? 50% of our work is anchored in investment professional. 50% is first in function leadership for product and engineering. We'll do some go-to-market as well, but it's because that product and engineering talent has massive synergy with the pipeline building for these check writing technical investors.
And since you opened the door, I'm going to ask you, what do, let's say, experienced product leader or experienced engineering leader maybe wants to consider VC in the future? What should they do right now to position themselves?
So there's a few things, right? I think if I'm advising a young buck, maybe you're a product manager, an individual contributor, a software engineer somewhere, and you got a lot of time ahead of you or whatnot. I'll call out, whether it's right or wrong. The ideal principal profile in VC right now is, you've been in product or eng at Character AI or OpenAI for 2 or 3 years. You did a fellowship where you got some venture exposure. You're probably 25 or 26 and early in your career right now. And that's whatever, that's like the classic one. Candidly, I think for the earlier career folks right now, I think the best advice I can give them would be like, one, be mindful of the landscape and the company that you're at. VCs are hiring for network, not just you, right? So if you're at places like Palantir, if you're at, back in the days, a PayPal, at a Stripe, that are notorious for pumping out A+ entrepreneurs, and because you worked with them, you're going to be well positioned to hear about or at least have the opportunity to invest in them. So that's the first thing, right? If I'm trying to get into venture, it starts with my network. What is the additive network? That can be from school. Maybe you went to a great prep high school. Maybe you were a math Olympian or a chess Olympian in high school. Maybe you went to Stanford, right? That VCs in the Bay Area are going to have the Stanford network map, but maybe the primary in New York doesn't. Or they probably do, right? But just like as an example, maybe a different firm outside of the Valley doesn't. But not everyone has MIT, right? So like it can be education. It can be clubs, right? Like it doesn't just have to be the investing club at Stanford. Pretty sure every college has an investing club right now. The dorm room fund is effectively a platform that gives every university their own fund. I mean, I'm probably misinterpreting it, but that's my sense of it, right? So like, go figure it out, right? I think most people just don't think about getting into venture until they're in a company in their 20s and they're like, oh wow, that would be a really great job. But so anyway, so be mindful. Like network is very important. So that can come from school, that can come from clubs during college. You can get pretty creative with that. Maybe you have 50,000 Twitter followers. Maybe you have a big following on your newsletter, right? Demonstrating people actually care about what you say, particularly if you're tweeting about tech or startups or a specific trend, that carries massive weight breaking into venture, right? So I'll move beyond network from those. And now let's think about like first company, right? Now, I was talking to my cousin like 6 months ago, and I wrote a tweet about it, about the conversation, because he's a junior at Babson right now, which is an absolute A-plus entrepreneurial school, best in the country, biased, but I think that he was asking awesome questions on what he should be doing right now if he wants to get into venture, but he doesn't want to go right out of school. He wants some startup experience and kind of live the tech world. What I told him, which I think most people would agree with, is go spend 2 years at a FANG, go get world-class at-scale exposure, go bet on yourself, and join a startup. I would pick, I'd land on a thesis for yourself on what you want to work on for the next 5 years, okay? Based on everything you know about the startup landscape, who's getting seeded right now is really important. Right? So like right now, defense tech, deep tech, American dynamism, like that shit is on fire in America right now. But I told him, like, pick a thesis, and this can be during your time at Facebook or during your time at Amazon, wherever you end up. It doesn't have to be a FANG, it can be like a TikTok, and be an Intuit. Intuit's rotational program is absolutely bonkersly fantastic for product. But go get that, jump into a startup that hits thesis that you're going to get excited about. Know it's going to fail. If it hits, amazing, right? But the way you pick the startup is being really familiar and familiarizing yourself with the venture landscape. There was a absolutely ridiculous stat that is on Sequoia's website that 99% of companies that Sequoia has led a seed round in are still operating. That is absolutely bonkers. And if I'm a 23-year-old kid, yeah, it's a seed company, but Sequoia led the seed. That kind of de-risks that opportunity quite a bit for me, right? So that's what I told my cousin to do. Like, look for, of course, like everyone's going to be looking for the Sequoia stuff, right? So you should probably also know Conviction is going to be just as competitive as Sequoia now. Thrive Cap is going to probably beat both of them right now. So like you should, and obviously the Thrive Cap is a little extreme crossover, I think the best crossover in the world. They'll beat on the later stage stuff, but not in the early stage. I shouldn't have said that. Right? But knowing who the good investors are, picking a thesis in a category, and bringing your FANG foundational skill set into a startup is going to distill like excellence into the culture. So you're going to be loved right away, right? The startup fits thesis, so you're actually going to be wanting to work on that product. And so you're happy to be there. You already told yourself it's going to fail, so you're not stressed over, oh shoot, are we going to raise? Probably banked a little bit from Meta, right? And now the thing that the startups give you as a product manager or an engineer, is the opportunity to accelerate your career. It doesn't matter how hard you work at Amazon or Meta or SpaceX. There is not a world where you can go from entry-level software engineer to VP in 5 years. There just isn't. You can't do it. If you go to a startup and grow with them, you're a 28-year-old CTO who led a, 1 million to 50 million ramp after 2 years at Facebook, a fellowship at wherever, and showing an interest in investing. Like, you're really well positioned, right? So it is the thing I tell people, this is the top of the mountain to be a venture investor, a partner or a GP, right? Less of the other ones, but a partner or GP. What does that? It means they're the most competitive jobs to land on earth. All right. I have a personal take that because of the bloat of 20 and 21, there will be, in the next year or two, in terms of people that are actually writing checks out of institutional funds, probably about 50% of the number of active investors today. I think it's going to shrink that much. I think there's that much bloat. So I'm just sharing all of this, right? Like, network, very important, but like performance and track record is really important for venture, right? Like, if you want to break in, you have to do something fairly extraordinary, at least with like a branded fund. Or you can play the long game, right? Track record will trump anything. So get into some great deals early. You don't need to work at Facebook and OpenAI.
Very useful, because a lot of the listeners here are product managers, and sometimes it's like, is there going to be a career beyond product management? So like people stop thinking, okay, I'll be CPO, and it'll be all good. And I encourage them to think about really like 10 years, 15 years, where do you want to go? And this path is one that's very enlightening for people.
On the product front and like accelerating into leadership, I think this is really important, right? I really do. So the game's changed a ton in product, right? It just has. In a million different ways. It just has. I think for like hiring excellent product managers right now, there's a couple of things that I just want to call out, right? I think if I'm a PM right now, how to best position myself on all of this stuff is be the PM who actually scales the company. Like, not someone who just worked at a hot one, right? Like, be the person who actually did it. You should have, a clear, differentiated take on where the market's going, right? I think that is people that are actually doing and building and can speak to the 0 to 1 and not just the 1 to 2. They're just going to stand out like no one else. And then the last piece to piggyback off that, right? PLG bottoms up, enterprise top down. It doesn't matter where you are, right? But like, if I'm an exec recruiter, in the way I go about assessing product leadership for PLG companies, for instance, right? It's like, who engineered the distribution unlock, right? Like, who at Notion realized templates would be this like growth engine that absolutely blows them up, right? Like, who is that person? I don't care who at Notion was maintaining their systems or like, putting some button on the new product. Like, I want that person, right? Or like, I think the other, like Figma. So like, who added the buy now or like the self-serve on Figma that completely took out the sales demo that you needed? Like that person, right? Like who are those people? That I think product recruiting is sophisticated enough where there were a couple of folks, the ones I think of come from Rivi. There were this guy, Austin B., and this guy, Andrew Underhand, and Chris from Artisanal. They've always got this. Like, they've always done this, and that's why they've always been at the top. But I think more people are starting to get this right now. So I just wanted to call that out.
In this world of executive search and venture capital, tell me more, how do people just stay up to speed and like get to understand this ecosystem overall? It's
a good question. And probably why it's fairly mystifying is because the only way to learn it is to talk to the folks that are in it. I saw an article speaking about how GC is potentially gearing up for an IPO, which to me it was kind of mind-blowing. And the reason I say that it doesn't have anything to do with the strength of the business. I'm sure it is an absolutely exceptional business, and probably not a better run one out there. But there are so many nuances and secret sauce involved in venture capital that I think would be really, I don't know. I'm not a venture capitalist and I've never run a fund, but I know the rigor and the transparency of public companies is just about polar opposite of that of venture. So I'd be curious to see exactly how that goes, right? The only reason I feel like I kind of am familiar with the arena a bit is a couple of firms ago, we started really looking and evaluating and this isn't the right way to index companies, by the way. In fact, it's a complete wrong way to index companies, but we would index based on strength of investor, right? So if I started a new search, okay, who are the sales leaders or who are the product leaders that are at Sequoia's Series A and B companies right now? Let me go Teramo, right? Absolutely crap strategy. And then there's something there, but not necessarily the right way to go about it. You got to figure out how to talk to them, right? And you can familiarize, just know like who's at the top, who's at the bottom. The people at the top might be a little harder to get to. There is not a person in the world who won't respond to a great cold email, right? There's just not. So figure it out, right? Show that you care, show that you did your research. Talk to someone. It can be an associate. Like start demystifying it a little bit. And if I'm a killer 45-year-old product manager right now, I say the 45 not to bring age into things, but just to say like I'm not the 22-year-old kid who's gonna get all the calls for like the Sequoia stuff, right? Like I'm later in my career, I'm really interested in venture, and I think I could kill it, right? For that person, if you're in product right now, figure out how to join a scout fund, get involved in a syndicate, do something, right? It can be, you do your own angel investing, very small checks, $5,000, $1,000 check, doesn't matter. Pick a thesis, pick a lane, and run after it. And that lane can be, okay, I am so obsessed with this agentic revolution. I know the enterprises are going to go all in, especially on the workflow piece. And the data piece that's the special sauce. So anyone building agentic at this intersection of like enterprise workflows and data, I want to go all in on, and that can be your thesis, and you can absolutely run with that. Or it can be game-changing founders that are also part of this syndicate or this club that I was a part of at Stanford, or ex-stripers, right? Whatever that is, like start writing checks, start getting familiar with them, start talking to founders, and then qualifying, assessing, vetting them in your head, and have some indexes and levers you're pulling on. Get the reps, find out a way to get the reps. Ideal scenario for you is to be involved in a scout fund. And I say this for a couple of different reasons. So venture, the platform, most everyone will have some sort of scout advisory network, community, something like that. A lot of VCs, and most of them at this point, have these advisory networks in some way, shape, form. They will have at any given time a bench of absolutely outstanding go-to-market sales leaders and marketing leaders, and they'll have someone who's exceptional at CTO and someone who's great at product on the enterprise, someone else great at consumer product. And when they invest in a company, and it's a consumer product company, and that company needs to hire a head of product, and needs some advice from someone who would understand consumer product direction. Maybe they're thinking going single to multi-product, they talk it through. Instead of talking to the investor who came from consulting, that firm is going to put them in touch with this advisor, right? This advisor who is not an investor, but they are on the platform side of the firm. Maybe it's not on their LinkedIn, but they are part of this advisory network at this firm. And through that, they're meeting founders that firm invested in. So they know what A+ looks like just through that advisory, right? Because the founder wouldn't have gotten a check. They would have never met that founder if Menlo didn't invest in them. But now, even though you didn't write that check and you have no idea what they looked at for diligence, you have no idea how that lead came into Menlo, you know that they were good enough to warrant this check. So you at least check that box, right? But so that advisory capacity, awesome. Get into it, right? But it's not ideal. The ideal is the scout thing, right? And the scout thing, and the reason I say this, you can keep shipping, you can keep building, keep scaling, keep managing massive teams. You can be the founder of your own founder CEO and still do this. The scout programs will differ at every single fund, right? But if you are, we'll just use Andreessen just because their program's like super well defined and it's all that gravy. If you're a scout for Andreessen, okay, you have the ability to write checks with their money, right? So one completely de-risks that for you. You're not writing your own personal dollars into these companies that most of them will fail, right? So it's a lot of people don't have the wealth or they don't want to take the risk on losing the wealth they've worked their behind off to build over the years to start angel investing just to get reps that they can point to just to get an interview at a venture firm, right? So doing a scout program completely eliminates and de-risks that entire piece. These scout programs, you'd be tied to a thesis, right? It might be a broad fund thesis. If you're at Andreessen, you're probably sitting under one of the GPs. Maybe you're on, we'll say, American Dynamism, because I'm obsessed with David and the entire fund over there. So let's just say that, right? And you're cutting checks there. You're going to get the ability to, one, source. People are going to come to you because you have the name. You'll see how sourcing works, but you'll also have visibility into pipeline of everything Andreessen, American Dynamism Fund is looking at right now. And what are they looking at in terms of diligence? And who is leading that diligence? Frickin' David Ulrich. He's not a bad guy to learn from, right? So you, after 2 years with a scout fund of Andreessen, doesn't have to be Andreessen. It can literally be any fund. I think Conviction would be great. I think 645 Ventures has a founder. Namdi came up through the ranks at Insight Partners, who's absolutely exceptional. They're building a scout fund-ish, I believe, I think. Don't quote me on that right now. But it doesn't matter the fund. Like, you're not joining full-time. When you join full-time, it matters. The scout, the net you look for is the exposure to the deal-making process, that entire motion end to end, hopefully coming away with a winner or two. And like, if you're writing checks today, it's likely that you raised, I shouldn't say that. If you're a fund and you've been able to raise from LPs in the last 12 months, you're an A+ GP, and I would work for any of those GPs who raised from credible LPs in the last 12 months, because it's been the hardest fundraising LP climate period. And it says a lot. They're kind of smart people. They know what they're doing. So that's my long take of like, figure out, and it can be advisor first, into scout fund, into investor, but just like get the exposure.
Last question for you, Alex. How do people connect with you and find out more about you?
On LinkedIn is probably the best for me. We are been working on getting our website up. Candidly, I had a website up, and then I took a look at Artisanal, and I took a look at some of the other folks that I just respect so much, and the site is now down. It wasn't ready to be up. So that'll be back up soon. But yeah, please reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to try to be helpful however I can.
Alex, thank you so much for appearing in the podcast, for sharing your insights, talking all about venture capital, recruiting, and products and engineering. Loved your insights.
Thanks for having me, Shobhit.
Hey, be sure to check out our website at intentionalproductmanager.com to see how you can level up in your career.